The Langford estate boardroom hadn't changed since the early 90s. The same glossy walnut tables stretched across the room, its surface reflecting decades of backroom deals and bitter family debates. The walls displayed photos of charity galas and business milestones, portraits of pride and polished facades. I wasn't in any of them. My name is Rachel Langford, though at family functions I'm mostly referred to as the one who bailed. I'm 33 now, but to them I'll always be the rebellious 20-something who rejected her inheritance to chase pipe dreams in tech. Today's urgent family summit had been called at the Langford Vineyard in Napa, supposedly to address financial adjustments. What they didn't know was that the vineyard and the entire Langford portfolio was already under new control. Mind. I sat at the far end, unassuming in a navy blazer, listening as my Uncle Gerald huffed through his quarterly slideshow. "The numbers are dismal," he grumbled, slapping his palm against the screen. "We're bleeding cash across every division." My cousin Drew, fresh out of Wharton and already a senior VP, rolled his eyes. "It's a rough patch. We'll recover, the Langfords always do." If only he knew the board now took its marching orders from ArcLight Holdings, a firm I built and used to gain quiet, complete control of Langford & Co. through shadow subsidiaries and discreet acquisitions. "The logistics division is worthless," my older sister Claire chimed in, barely looking up from her gold-plated tablet. "Might as well sell it for scraps." I bit the inside of my cheek to stop from laughing. The logistics unit was the most promising tech-adjacent asset we had. Under ArcLight, we'd embedded AI-driven systems that were already drawing investor attention in Silicon Valley. "What's so funny?" Gerald snapped, glaring down the table. "You find the situation humorous, Rachel?" The room tensed. Even Claire paused mid-scroll. "I was just considering solutions," I said evenly. Gerald scoffed. "Solutions? From you? The one who walked away from the family trust to play founder in some garage?" They had no idea. But they were about to. 5 years ago, I turned down the position of Brand Strategy Director, a fancy title with no real power. It was a pacifier, a distraction to keep me from asking too many questions, while my cousins played executives. Instead, I took my inheritance and founded ArcLight Holdings, targeting tech-based turnarounds and hidden value acquisitions. I leaned back slightly in my chair. "I do have some experience in corporate restructuring," I said evenly. Drew chuckled. "Experience? You mean your little startup in a co-working space downtown? This is Langford & Co., Rachel. It's a billion-dollar legacy. Leave the serious work to the professionals." I almost laughed. My real office spans the top 3 floors of the Monarch Tower, an elite space they've never been invited to. The shared workspace was a ruse, a calculated move to stay underestimated. My father, seated quietly at the side, shifted. He'd stepped down as CEO last spring, yielding control to Uncle Gerald despite my warnings. Dad never had the spine to challenge his older brother. "Rachel's company, ArcLight, has done well," he said hesitantly. "Maybe we should listen." "Done well?" Gerald scoffed. "Max, your daughter is pretending to be a CEO while the rest of us run a real company. She's a disappointment and you know it." That word, disappointment, always struck the same nerve. I'd heard it after proposing digital integration, after declining to marry the CFO's son, after choosing independence over nepotism. Claire let out an exaggerated sigh. "Can we wrap this up? I have a lunch meeting at the pavilion." I glanced at my watch. 3 minutes to go. The acquisition paperwork was already signed. Langford & Co. would officially become a subsidiary of ArcLight Holdings before their dessert menus arrived. "The logistics division isn't the problem," I said, locking eyes with Gerald. "Your entire model is obsolete. You're losing market share because you're allergic to change." Gerald slammed his hand on the table. "I've run this company on your grandfather's principles: discipline, tradition, control." I thought of my grandfather, the bold strategist who pioneered hybrid shipping lanes before it was mainstream. He would have backed me, not clung to outdated methods. "And that," I said quietly, "is why you're failing. The world evolved. You didn't." But Langford and Co. is crumbling because you're too arrogant to adapt, I said, my voice low but steady. Enough, Uncle Gerald bellowed, his face turning a shade too close to crimson. You lost the right to criticize this company the day you walked away. You're worthless to this family, worthless to this business. Before I could reply, the door burst open. Gerald's assistant, usually composed, looked pale and breathless. Sir? Mr. Langford, she stammered. There's an emergency call from the board. Arclight Holdings has just acquired controlling interest in Langford and Co. Silence shattered into chaos. Drew dropped his luxury pen onto the floor with a sharp click. Claire's tablet slipped from her hand and hit the table with a dull thud. Gerald stood frozen, jaw working soundlessly. Arclight? My father whispered, blinking. But that's mine, I finished, rising to my feet. Though its full name is Arclight Global Strategies. We're the largest digital transformation firm in North America, specializing in revitalizing stagnant corporations like this one. Silence fell again, this time heavier. Years of condescension, eye rolls, and hushed gossip about my failed detour had all led to this. That's impossible, Drew said hoarsely. Arclight's a multi-billion-dollar group. You just ran that tiny startup? I pulled out my phone and mirrored the Arclight website onto the conference screen. There it was, my photo under Founder and CEO, our global footprint, our financials, and the official acquisition announcement. That tiny startup was a front, I said, locking eyes with them one by one. It kept you underestimating me while I built something world-class. Claire was pale now. What happens to the logistics division, she asked. It will be restructured along with everything else, I replied. The board meeting in 10 minutes will confirm me as CEO, and the press release hits every outlet at noon. You can't do this, Gerald growled, his voice finally returning. We're family. I let out a quiet laugh. Was it family when you called me worthless? When you buried every idea I brought to the table? When you handed power to the least qualified simply because of their last name? My father slowly stood. Rachel, please. Let's talk. We can fix this. I met his eyes. I already have. If you've ever been called worthless, only to rise higher than anyone imagined, hit that subscribe button, because Rachel's story isn't over, and the next boardroom battle is one you won't want to miss. We could have talked years ago, I said, cutting off my father's shaky attempt at reconciliation. You could have listened when I warned you about Gerald. When I showed you how to save this company before it hit free fall, but you made your choices. Dismissive uncle, silent father, entitled cousins. I straightened. Now I'm making mine. The assistant lingered nervously in the doorway, clutching a press folder. Ma'am, the media's already calling. They're requesting a comment on the acquisition. Gerald slumped into his chair, the last of his bravado draining away. Comments, he muttered. What am I supposed to say? That my worthless niece just bought us out? I smiled, stepping forward. Not worthless anymore, am I? I paused. I'm your boss. The room erupted. Claire burst into tears. Drew barked orders into his phone, shouting for legal counsel. Gerald looked like he was trying not to collapse. But I wasn't finished. I walked to the head of the table, his seat, now mine, set down my laptop and opened the restructuring files. Let's begin. I have a few thoughts about revamping the logistics division. The same relatives who once laughed behind my back now sat in stunned silence as I outlined my vision. My company. My rules. The disappointment had just taken command. The board meeting that followed was swift. My majority ownership left no room for debate. By noon, the press release was live. Langford & Co.'s stock surged 15% within minutes. The market had spoken, and it welcomed change. My family, however, was in pieces. This is illegal, Gerald thundered, pacing the boardroom like a caged bull. You had to cheat somehow. Everything was by the book, I replied smoothly. Maybe if you'd read those quarterly reports instead of giving keynote speeches at golf retreats, you'd have noticed Arclight buying up stock. Claire was texting her legal team in a panic. It was pointless. I'd sealed every loophole. Your Chief Innovation Officer title is revoked, I added calmly. And Drew's VP role? Terminated. You can't fire us, Drew shouted. We're Langfords. So am I said, cool and clear. The Langford you all called worthless? How does it feel, I asked quietly, to be fired by someone you all called worthless? My father sat silently in the corner, shoulders slumped. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. Where did we go wrong, he muttered. How did we not see this coming? You saw what you wanted to see, I answered. A difficult daughter who wouldn't follow the script. It never crossed your mind that I wasn't rejecting the game? I was rewriting the rules. At that moment, my assistant Catherine stepped into the room. Ms. Langford, the transition team is standing by. The auditors are ready to begin. Uncle Gerald visibly paled. Auditors? Of course, I said, smiling. We'll need to assess the full extent of damage your leadership caused, starting with those club memberships charged to corporate, personal expenses disguised as business development, and those generous loans to family members. Gerald's mouth opened, but no words came. You tear apart your own family, Claire whispered. You never treated me like family, I replied. You treated me like a liability, a stain to be hidden or controlled. Now you'll finally know what it's like to have no control. My phone buzzed. The first wave of changes had gone live. Catherine, please have security assist my family. They'll need to vacate their offices immediately. This isn't over, Gerald barked, though his voice shook. The family won't stand for it. The family, I said evenly, sold their shares years ago. Arclight now owns 58% of Langford & Co. I own your titles, your futures, and every secret you thought you'd buried. As security arrived, I turned to my father. You can stay on, as an advisor, but only if you're ready to listen this time. He stared at me, really seeing me for the first time. When did you become so powerful? I always was, I said. You just never looked close enough. The next week was a storm of reform. The dusty old Langford logo came down, replaced by a sleek modern design. The logistics division, once mocked, became our crown jewel. Nepotism was replaced by merit. Innovators took the reins. Naturally, the family didn't go quietly. Gerald tried rallying shareholders, only to discover they'd already cashed out. Claire tried leaking gossip, but it was drowned out by headlines about Arclight's bold reinvention. Drew tried a different approach. He showed up at my new corner office, the one that used to be his. Come on, Rachel, he said, attempting charm. We're family. Surely we can work something out. I've changed. I leaned back in his old chair and studied him. Have you? Drew began, his voice faltering. What lesson would that be? That I underestimated you. That we all did. But we can fix this. We can make it a real family company again. It is a real family company, I said calmly, just not the family you envisioned. I stood. Your position has already been filled. By someone qualified. I'd suggest updating your resume. He left in tears, another first in Langford family history. The audit confirmed everything I suspected. Years of corruption, unchecked nepotism, and self-dealing. Gerald had siphoned millions into shell accounts. Claire had padded payrolls with friends under fake consulting contracts. Drew had traded Langford's stock based on privileged boardroom information. The SEC will want a word, my legal team said grimly. Then give them everything, I replied. Full transparency. Every document, every payout, every fake invoice. Let them see how the Langfords really operated. My father, now a quiet advisor in name only, watched the unraveling with hollow eyes. They could go to prison, he whispered one night. They made their choices, I said, just like they chose to call me worthless. And the fallout was swift and spectacular. Gerald was indicted for embezzlement. Claire and Drew were permanently barred from securities trading. The Langford name, once equated with privilege and power, now trended with scandal and disgrace. But through the wreckage, Arclight thrived. Our stock doubled in a month. Investors saw what I had always seen, potential buried under arrogance. With the tech division properly funded, we released innovations that redefined our industry. The culture shifted from inheritance to innovation, from legacy to leadership. 6 months after the takeover, I sat in my office reviewing quarterly reports. The top floor view was breathtaking, but I wasn't looking at the skyline. I was staring at a framed photo on my desk, the last Langford Christmas before I left, everyone beaming with pride, and me, slightly apart, already planning my rebellion. Catherine entered quietly. "Your uncle's sentencing is tomorrow. Will you be attending?" I thought for a moment. Gerald would face a judge, his power gone, his empire in ruins. "No," I said softly. "I have a company to run." She nodded, then paused at the door. "Oh, one more thing. The new boardroom family portraits just arrived. Would you like me to hang them?" Catherine asked softly, referring to the new boardroom photos. "Take down the old ones," I instructed. "This isn't a family company anymore. It's something better." That evening, long after the office had cleared out, there was a quiet knock at my door. My father stepped in, shoulders stooped, eyes tired. But behind the weariness, there was something else. Pride. "I underestimated you," he said simply. "We all did. Can you ever forgive us?" I leaned back, the weight of years behind my silence. "Forgiveness was never the goal," I replied. This wasn't revenge. It was about showing that success doesn't have to come from tradition, that worth isn't defined by legacy. He nodded slowly, the truth finally settling in. "The company, what you've done with it, it's extraordinary." "It always could have been," I said, "but none of you were willing to see past the old way." He turned to go, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you, even if I don't fully understand how you became this person." "I always was," I said quietly. "You just never looked close enough." After he left, I stood at the window, watching the city twinkle beneath the dark Napa sky. Somewhere out there, my relatives were bracing for Uncle Gerald's sentencing. Elizabeth had listed her penthouse. Drew was submitting resumes for jobs he used to laugh at. But I wasn't thinking about them. I was thinking about the future, about a company unburdened by legacy, free to innovate, to rise. The worthless daughter was now the most valuable Langford of all, and she was only just beginning. Catherine's voice buzzed through the intercom. "Your 7 p.m. is here. The venture capital team from Menlo Park." I smiled, adjusting my jacket. Time to show another room of traditionalists what the future looks like. Send them in. And Catherine? Have the old family photos delivered to my relatives. They'll need the memories more than I will. Those photos would arrive in the places they'd never imagined falling. Elizabeth's one-bedroom rental, Drew's childhood room at his mother's house, Gerald's attorney's office. But I wouldn't be in those photos anymore. I had new pictures to take, new chapters to build, new legacies to create. Because in the end, success wasn't just the best revenge. It was the life they never thought I could build, lived boldly, in full view. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or told you weren't enough, this story is for you. I was once the worthless one too, but I turned doubt into drive and built something undeniable. I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. Tell me about the moment they dismissed you and what you did next, or what you plan to do. Because success isn't about revenge, it's about reclaiming your voice. And if my journey resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. Let's keep building a community of quiet strength, bold ambition, and unstoppable resilience. Your comeback starts now.